Welcome to NorCal Slot Car Scene. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I prepared a Carrera Aston Martin Vantage GT3 for racing in Northern California on wood non-magnet tracks. The rules we use for the Carrera GT3 class are pretty simple. You're allowed to replace the guide and the braid, remove the original wiring harness to simplify the wiring, change the tires, and adjust the body so it floats properly. Now that we know the modifications that we're going to make, it's time to take the body off and get started. As with any race car, the first thing I do is strip the car down to nothing. In this case, just the motor and the chassis. The most time-consuming part of any build of a Scalextric or a Carrera car is getting the body to float properly for better handling. When I looked at the chassis, I saw there were 4 tall posts that stick up into the body that are adjacent to the actual body screw holes. Those were removed. I also took a rotary tool and ground the body mount area flat so that the body mount now floats on top of the hole as opposed to sitting in the hole. I used a hand sander to make sure the sides of the body were clear of the chassis when the body is attached. Now it's time to do the first test fit of the body to the chassis. When I did this, I found there were still quite a few areas that were binding. I had to remove material from the front splitter, the rear diffuser, the interior of the car, and the solder on top of the motor. Once I did that, the body is now free to move forward and backward, even with the screws attached. The next step in this build are the wheels and tires. First, remove the tires from the wheels both front and rear. Use your tire truer to take any high spots off the wheels and make sure they're perfectly round. The tire of choice for our club in the rear is NSR Super Grips, so I mounted a set of NSR 5206 tires on the wheels. I mounted the rear axle assembly in my tire truer and trued the tires. Once this was done, I mounted the rear axle assembly back into the chassis. I'm using the stock Carrera front wheels and tires, and I true them until the chassis sits level front to back. Replacing the guide on a Carrera car used to be somewhat of a hassle, but the new CG slot car adapters make that job easy. Along with the CG adapter, I used a Slotting Plus cut-to-fit guide. I did a quick test fit and cut the Slotting Plus guide to the proper length. Assemble the guide with the braid and screw it into the adapter so now it's one unit. On your setup block, put pieces of tape for the tires to sit on. I secured the chassis to the setup block with a piece of tape. This will prevent the guide from moving when we glue it in place. Insert the guide assembly into the chassis. The guide and the braid need to fit flush against the setup block. You will probably need to keep some pressure on the guide assembly as you glue it in place. When you remove the tape from the setup block, you can see that the tape has given us the perfect ride height for the front tires. When the glue on the guide assembly has completely dried, it's time to rewire the car. I routed the wire directly from the guide around the front body post and back to the motor. I did cut a slot in the front bulkhead to allow the wire to lay flat and run along the chassis. To make sure the wire does not interfere with the body movement, I glued it in 2 places. The wiring is done and the chassis is complete. Finally, I'm going to use my nail polish technique on the front tires so they have as little grip as possible. Now it's time for testing. I'm going to take the magnet out because it's no longer necessary and add about 2 grams of lead to each side of the chassis. The threads on the stock body mounting screws can obstruct the movement that we work so hard to get, so replace them with partial thread screws. The Aston Martin is done and ready for testing. We'll see how it does against my other Carrera GT3 car, a BMW Z4. Thanks for watching. This is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene.